Full spoilers for all 16 films. A lot of horror survival rankings quietly change the question from one movie to the next. One victim only has to last through the night. Another gets judged over a year, while somebody else receives credit for refusing to enter the story at all. The numbers may look tidy, but they aren't measuring the same thing. I'm using one rule for every entry. Each section names the role you're taking and the exact moment the danger has found you. Sometimes you're a named target. In other films, you're one person in a group, or somebody exposed because of where you live. You keep that role's knowledge, relationships, location, and ordinary resources. You can make better choices, but you don't get facts that only the audience knows. You have to reach the end of the original film, alive and still be yourself. Possession and assimilation count as losing. So does having somebody else control your body. The percentages are estimates. A shark and a curse obviously don't come with comparable real-world statistics. The numbers are here to keep the same standard in place. I look at what the character knows, and whether the threat follows rules they can observe. I also count how much help remains after one bad choice. Number 16 is the most survivable. Number 1 is the situation where almost every reasonable decision arrives too late. Number 16 is Jaws, with a survival estimate of 96%. I'm starting you in Amity after Alex Kintner is killed in front of a crowded beach. The first death could still be dismissed by officials who don't want a shark problem. The second public attack removes that excuse. The danger is real. It has a clear physical boundary, and you know where it is. That boundary does nearly all the work. The shark can attack swimmers and boats, including the orca. It can't follow an ordinary resident onto dry land or into a building. You don't need to understand anything stranger than where the water begins. Stay out of the ocean until the shark is dead or the film ends. Amity makes that harder than it should be. The mayor pressures Brody to keep the beaches open because the town depends on summer visitors. Local fishermen later catch a tiger shark, and the town wants the problem declared finished. Hooper says it isn't the animal responsible. He also finds another attacked boat. Every gap in the evidence becomes another excuse to reopen the beaches. An average resident can ignore that pressure. Don't swim. Don't take a small boat out to prove anything. Keep children away from the water, including the shallow estuary. If the beach stays open, that changes the town's decision. It doesn't change the shark's range. Brody's odds collapse when he chooses to hunt it. On the orca, the shark strikes the hull and pulls barrels underwater. It keeps returning as Quinn's plan falls apart, then kills him. Hooper survives underwater after the shark destroys the cage. Brody only finishes it when a compressed air tank and a rifle give him one narrow shot from a sinking boat. The shark has found your town, so avoiding Amity entirely isn't allowed. You can still stay on land. I love Jaws partly because Brody is afraid of the water before the movie gives him a reason to be. For once, the frightened person begins with the correct instinct. At the end, Brody and Hooper paddle toward shore after the shark is dead. A resident who spent those days inland would have made it through much more easily. Some people will still take reckless boat trips, and political pressure can make a crowded beach look safe. That explains the missing 4%. The shark gives you the clearest survival rule in the ranking. Number 15 is as follows, at 72%. You're in Jay's position immediately after Hugh passes the entity to her and explains what he knows. He's already tied her to a chair in an abandoned building and shown her the thing walking toward them. His method is cruel, but Jay doesn't have to spend half the film deciding whether the threat exists. She wakes up knowing the main rule and the direction it travels. She also knows why it's chosen her. The entity only walks, but it can look like anyone. People outside the chain can't see it. If it kills the current target, it works backward through the chain. Sex can pass the danger to another person, though the film never treats that as a clean or permanent solution. Those rules make the threat relentless, but the film still gives Jay room to manage it. She has friends and working cars, with open roads around them. The entity doesn't teleport in front of her. It can enter buildings and use familiar faces, so a locked door isn't enough by itself. Distance still buys real time. A drive across the city can buy hours, and a longer trip buys more. Jay's biggest advantage is that people stay with her. Kelly, Paul, and Yara can't see the entity, but they can drive and watch the ordinary entrances. They can also react when Jay points to someone approaching. Their help isn't perfect. They may mistake panic for danger, and Jay may mistake a real person for the entity. Hugh's explanation still gives the group enough structure to take her seriously. Greg doesn't. He has sex with Jay, takes the curse, and continues living normally because he never sees enough to accept the rule. The entity reaches him by looking like his mother. Jay tries to warn him and arrives too late. Passing the curse only helps if the next person understands what happened and changes their behavior. The swimming pool plan is much less reliable than driving away. The group surrounds the pool with electrical equipment and expects Jay to identify a target nobody else can see. The creature throws those objects at her. Gunfire appears to injure it, but the film never proves that electricity or a headshot can end the curse. The one rule I trust is distance. Keep 2 working vehicles and sleep in shifts somewhere with long sight lines. Every helper needs to understand what they can and can't see. Nobody should stand in front of the person Jay points at. Passing the curse remains an emergency choice with a victim attached to it. It isn't a cure. Jay and Paul are alive at the end. A person walks behind them, and the film leaves its identity unresolved. The danger may continue after the credits, but the same endpoint applies to every movie here. Jay reaches it alive and still herself. Hugh also gave her an explanation while there was time to create distance. That's why It Follows lands much nearer the top than its premise first suggests. Number 14 is Psycho, at 59%. You're in Marion Crane's position after checking into cabin 1 at the Bates Motel. Norman has your alias from the register, knows which room you're in, and can see your car outside. You don't know about the preserved body in the house or the second identity Norman uses when he kills. The motel is almost empty. Dinner soon becomes personal enough to make plenty of travelers uncomfortable. Psycho has a human threat with no supernatural reach. Sam overpowers Norman at the end, and police take him alive. Marion's car still works, with the highway close by. The danger comes from how little warning appears before the shower attack. Norman speaks gently and brings food. He seems embarrassed by the sound of his mother's abuse from the house, so Marion feels sympathy for him. Their conversation also gives her a reason to leave. He talks about being trapped and gets defensive when she suggests placing his mother somewhere she can receive care. Marion decides to return the stolen money and go home. She never gets the chance. An average traveler isn't going to hear that conversation and identify a murderer. Survival depends on leaving when the situation feels wrong, before it becomes evidence. What saves you here is being willing to look rude. Keep the cabin door secured. When the owner gets angry over a mild suggestion about his mother, drive to a busier motel or continue until daylight. Use the office phone first so somebody else knows where you were. The shower removes every ordinary advantage. Marion is unarmed, the water covers sound, and the curtain hides the attacker until the knife is already moving. Once Norman enters in his mother's clothes, there's almost no time to recover. Arbogast later sees his attacker for a moment and still dies on the staircase. The motel's isolation also helps Norman erase evidence. He wraps Marion's body, puts it in her car, and sinks the car in the swamp. A traveler who disappears there may not be connected to Norman quickly. Marion's theft pulls a private investigator and her family toward the motel, but that search begins after she's dead. Psycho ranks high because the exit stays open for most of the evening. The car works, and the highway is right there. Norman hasn't cut the motel off from the world. You only need to treat a bad feeling as a reason to leave without waiting for proof. The estimate stops at 59% because the film gives Marion no clear danger signal. Many reasonable people would stay. They'd lock the door, take a shower, and plan to leave in the morning. In most movies, that would be enough. At the Bates Motel, the ordinary decision is exactly what puts the victim where Norman expects to find her. Number 13 is Halloween, at 55%. The clock starts when Laurie Strode leaves a key at the Myers house, and Michael sees her. From then on, he follows her through Haddonfield. Laurie notices him outside school, then behind a hedge and near her neighborhood. Every sighting ends before she can show someone else enough to make the warning feel solid. Michael is physically present. He has to get close and find a way inside, which gives Laurie more options than a victim facing Freddy or Sadako. The problem is that Haddonfield looks safe. People are nearby, phones work, and houses have locks. Michael moves through all of it without causing the public alarm an obvious attack would create. Laurie's first useful choice is to stop treating each sighting as a separate odd moment. A man outside school, the same shape near the hedge, and a car following her belong in one report. She doesn't need to know his name. She can tell her father or the police that the same man has followed her across several locations. Staying with a group would help. Annie and Linda split off into separate houses and assume familiar sounds come from familiar people. Michael uses doors and darkness. Their confidence that nobody dangerous could already be inside does the rest. He kills Annie in the car, Bob in the kitchen, and Linda while she thinks Bob is under a sheet. Laurie survives longer because she pays attention to the children and responds when something feels wrong. She still crosses the street alone to investigate the Wallace house. Michael attacks after she finds the bodies and blocks her easiest route back to the children. She gets outside, reaches another house, and has to keep fighting after the residents ignore her banging. Michael can be hurt. Laurie drives a knitting needle into his neck, stabs his eye with a wire hanger, and later stabs him with his own knife. Loomis shoots him repeatedly and knocks him from the balcony. Each injury creates time, but none should be mistaken for a confirmed kill. The final empty lawn makes that clear without importing anything from the sequels. The safest response is painfully ordinary. I'd keep the children with me and call the police before crossing the street. Lock the house and turn on the exterior lights. Make enough noise to bring neighbors outside. If Michael enters, use an injury to escape. Don't stand near him to see whether he gets back up. Laurie, Tommy, and Lindsay reach the end alive. Michael's ability to absorb damage lowers the estimate. Most people around Laurie don't understand the danger until he's already in the room. He still has to reach you. That leaves more room for help than the films lower on the list will allow. Number 12 is The Exorcist, at 52%. Here, you're Regan, when the unexplained episodes become violent and the bed begins moving. By then, the danger has direct access to her body. Regan can't solve the situation through personal discipline or a clever escape route. Her chance depends on whether the adults around her keep looking after medicine, stops explaining what they are seeing. Chris does that. She takes Regan through exhausting tests and accepts medical explanations while they remain possible. When the results don't match the severity of the attacks, she keeps searching. A sudden personality change with seizures and injuries requires medical care before anyone jumps to a supernatural conclusion. The film spends a long time showing that process. Soon Regan no longer controls her voice or movement. The demon can imitate people and expose private information. It also moves objects and uses Regan's body with enough force to injure anyone nearby. Burke Dennings is found dead below her bedroom window, with his head turned backward. The attack itself happens off-screen. A room meant to isolate one sick child becomes the center of the threat. Constant supervision improves the odds. The windows need to stay secured, and anything Regan can use as a weapon needs to leave the room. Once the violence becomes undeniable, nobody goes in alone. Record what happens so each new doctor or priest isn't starting from a parent's description that sounds impossible. Chris eventually has evidence, including the change in Regan's voice and the physical events in the room. Chris begins as a skeptic, which is useful. He looks for signs that could be explained by illness or performance. He also recognizes that the demon wants an audience and uses Regan's suffering to attack the adults around her. The exorcism only begins after the church accepts the case and Marin arrives. The exorcism frees Regan, though Marin dies in the room. Karras provokes the demon into leaving her and entering him. He then throws himself through the window before it can keep control. Regan survives and appears to have no memory of the worst events. She reaches the end alive and recognizably herself. I still only give Regan 52%. Once the possession is established, she has almost no control over the outcome. She needs a mother who refuses to abandon her and priests willing to enter the room. Karras then makes a final choice he can't survive. Many families would lose time to disbelief or shame, while a professional may only see the part that fits a familiar diagnosis. Regan stays just above the halfway mark because the film shows one complete rescue. The demon is powerful, but it remains focused on her and the people who enter the room. Help can still reach the house. That matters more than anything Regan can do for herself by this point. Number 11 is Child's Play, at 48%. For Child's Play, the danger becomes direct when Chucky drops the toy routine and reveals himself to Andy. Andy is 6 years old. He understands that Charles Lee Ray is inside the doll, but the adults hear a frightened child blaming a toy for deaths he can't explain. That credibility gap gives Chucky nearly as much protection as his size. The doll can move quickly, hide in ordinary rooms, use tools, and attack from places an adult won't watch. Chucky also knows exactly how people see Andy. When Maggie dies, Andy's story sounds impossible. When Eddie Caputo's house explodes, the police see a child connected to another violent scene. Telling the truth makes Andy look less safe to the people who could protect him. Karen gets the first piece of evidence that doesn't depend on Andy's word. The batteries remain sealed in the box, even though Chucky has been talking and moving. When she threatens to throw him into the fire, he finally attacks her. From that moment, the survival odds change. One adult believes Andy, and she can bring evidence to Detective Norris. Chucky is stronger than a doll should be, but he still has a small body with limited reach. He can be trapped, burned, shot, and physically knocked away. His injuries matter more as the body becomes human. John Bishop explains that Chucky's time in the doll has changed him. To escape it, Chucky must transfer into the first person he revealed himself to. That makes Andy the intended body. The film gives the family several chances to finish the threat, and several reasons to think they already have. Chucky survives being burned. Separate body parts continue moving. Norris finally shoots him through the heart after Karen and Andy have already endured another attack. Treating one injury as final is almost as dangerous here as making the same mistake in Halloween. Once Chucky reveals himself, Andy needs distance from the doll, and more than one adult nearby. Karen should pin Chucky under something heavy while another person watches. Call the police before moving him. Keep him in sight, even after he stops moving. One officer checking the room and finding a harmless doll isn't enough. The hard part is obtaining that first adult witness. Andy can't force Chucky to move on command. Chucky can remain still whenever someone enters. A child who runs from him may be restrained and returned to the same apartment while the doll waits nearby. Andy, Karen, and Norris survive the final attack, and Chucky is stopped before completing the transfer. That keeps this close to 50%. A small physical attacker should be easier than an adult killer. Chucky's real advantage is social. He looks harmless, and the only person who knows the truth is young enough to be ignored. Number 10 is The Shining, at 44%. This one puts you in Wendy's position after Danny returns from room 237 with bruises around his neck. The family is snowed into the Overlook. Jack has injured Danny before, and Wendy now has a direct reason to believe her son is unsafe around either the hotel or his father. That start point matters. Leaving when Jack accepts the winter job would avoid the film. Leaving after Danny is hurt uses evidence Wendy actually has. The radio still works, and the snowcat is available. The hotel hasn't closed every route yet. Wendy's strongest move is to leave immediately with Danny. She doesn't need to settle whether Jack caused the bruises, whether someone else is inside, or whether the hotel itself is responsible. A child has been injured in an isolated building, and the only other adult is becoming less reliable. That's enough. Delay gives the Overlook time to work through Jack. He sees Lloyd behind the bar, and later meets Grady in the bathroom. The hotel gives him alcohol and praise. It also gives him a story in which his family is the obstacle. Wendy doesn't hear those conversations. She sees the result when Jack stops behaving like a frustrated husband and begins speaking as if the hotel has assigned him a duty. Jack also cuts off the family's access to help. He disables the radio and sabotages the snowcat. Halloran senses Danny's distress and crosses the country to reach the hotel, only to be killed moments after entering. His arrival still leaves a second snowcat outside. Wendy and Danny escape in it. Wendy survives several mistakes that could have ended the film differently. She confronts Jack alone after finding the endless pages he's typed. She has to strike him with the bat and drag him into the pantry. Grady later releases him. Wendy then spends precious time moving through a hotel filled with apparitions while Jack hunts Danny with an axe. Danny's injury is enough reason to use the working snowcat. I wouldn't wait for Jack to agree. Call for help while the radio works. Put put Danny and the emergency supplies in the vehicle, and leave in warm clothing. If the snowcat has already been damaged, protect the radio and keep Jack away from tools. Danny needs a room with more than one exit. Danny survives through attention and memory. He understands the hedge maze better than Jack, walks backward in his own tracks, and hides after breaking the trail. Wendy reaches Halloran's vehicle. Jack freezes outside while mother and son drive away. The estimate stays below half because the hotel has already isolated the family and is working through Jack. Wendy and Danny make it out, but their escape depends on Halloran arriving with a replacement vehicle after Jack destroys the first one. The longer Wendy waits for supernatural proof, the more ordinary escape routes Jack removes. Number 9 is Get Out at 37%. The clock starts after Missy hypnotizes Chris and sends him into the sunken place. He wakes in bed the next morning, so he still has physical freedom. His phone is losing power. The household staff behave in ways he can't explain. The Armitages have already shown that they can remove his control without touching him. Chris doesn't know the full plan. He does know Missy ignored his refusal and used a spoon against a teacup to force him back into the memory of his mother's death. That's enough reason to leave before he knows about the photographs, the auction, or the surgery. The Armitages keep control by making each incident look like something a guest might excuse. Dean's comments are uncomfortable, and Jeremy is aggressive. Walter runs at night. Georgina cries while insisting everything is fine. Then a large gathering treats Chris like an object while pretending to be polite. Rose stays beside him and translates each warning into a misunderstanding. Rose makes the escape much harder because Chris believes she'll leave with him. When he asks for the car keys, she searches her bag while the rest of the family closes around him. For a few seconds, the search looks normal. Then Rose stops pretending, and Missy already has the teacup ready. Once Chris is restrained, the odds drop below the number I'm giving the whole entry. The television explains the coagula procedure. Jim Hudson intends to occupy Chris's body while Chris remains conscious somewhere inside it. Reaching the end alive in that state wouldn't count as survival under this ranking. Chris escapes by noticing what the chair gives him. He pulls cotton from the armrests and packs it into his ears so the hypnotic cue can't put him under again. The trap supplies the material he needs. An average victim could still spend those final hours fighting the straps instead of examining the chair. The camera flash gives Chris another opening by briefly bringing Logan's suppressed identity forward. Later, a flash lets Walter regain enough control to shoot Rose and then himself. Rod arrives because he took Chris's fear seriously. He kept tracking the situation when the official response went nowhere. Chris's safest window is the morning after the hypnosis. Keep the keys and phone, then send Rod the address before confronting Rose. If the keys disappear, start walking toward the road. Don't sit down for another private conversation with Missy. Chris has enough information to justify leaving, even though he can't yet explain the sunken place. Get Out lands at 37% because the family has prepared the property and its social cover. Their method is already working before Chris knows there's a method. He survives because he notices what's around him and fights when an opportunity opens. He also gets help from identities the surgery didn't completely erase. Rod's arrival finishes the escape. A route out exists, but the family has spent the whole weekend making it look unreasonable. Number 8 is Ringu, at 24%. You're in Reiko's place immediately after watching the videotape in the rental cabin and receiving a silent phone call. The call ties the threat to the location, but it doesn't explain the 7-day deadline, or the act that might interrupt it. Reiko begins with images that look like a nightmare, and 4 recent deaths that could still be coincidence. Her job helps. She's already investigating the story as a journalist, and she can trace the teenager's movements back to the cabin. Ryuji has abilities that let him perceive information other people can't, though the film never turns those abilities into a complete guide. They have 7 days to connect a tape, a phone call, Sadako's history, and the well hidden beneath the cabin. The curse gives almost no feedback during that search. A person can spend 6 days following the wrong explanation and receive no warning that the deadline is still active. Reiko's son Yoichi watches a copy of the tape, which adds another target and another deadline. The adults now have to solve the rule before either of them dies. Reiko and Ryuji uncover the story of Shizuko and Sadako. Reiko's vision shows Sadako attacked and left alive in the well. They find the well below the cabin and recover her remains. Reiko reaches her deadline and lives. For a few hours, they believe recovering Sadako's body ended it. Ryuji dies the next day. Sadako comes through the television, crosses the room, and kills him, even though the body has been recovered. Reiko then understands the important difference between them. She made a copy of the tape and showed it to Ryuji. He didn't pass it on. That rule gives a root to survival, and makes the ranking ugly. Copying the tape and showing it to someone else appears to move the curse forward. It doesn't destroy anything. The film ends with Reiko driving toward her father's home with the tape and Yoichi preparing to save her son by involving another person. An average person has a serious warning problem. The tape contains no instructions. The phone call says nothing. The deaths happen 1 week after viewing, which means the pattern becomes clear only after several people are already dead. Even a person who believes the curse may spend the week trying burial, prayer, destruction, or distance. The film only supports one action. A fast investigation helps. Record the exact viewing time and contact everyone linked to the other deaths. Preserve the tape as evidence without showing it to anyone casually. A copy may become necessary, though making one before the rule is understood creates another dangerous object. Ordinary barriers don't stop Sadako from reaching Ryuji. The only demonstrated survival method still requires another viewer. Reiko lives to the end, so the chance isn't close to zero. She also has unusual resources and discovers the rule after her own deadline has passed. Most viewers would have less help and less reason to duplicate a tape that seems dangerous. 24% reflects a proven escape with almost no usable instruction. Number 7 is Night of the Living Dead, at 20%. For Night of the Living Dead, you're an unbitten adult inside the farmhouse after the broadcast confirmed the dead are attacking the living. The house is already drawing a crowd outside. Ben has begun boarding the windows, and the people inside have tools, a radio, a television, and enough information to understand that this isn't one isolated attacker. One ghoul can be stopped. They move slowly and recoil from fire. Destroying the brain stops them. The number outside keeps growing, and any death can create another danger inside the house. Karen Cooper weakens after being bitten, dies in the cellar, and returns while the others are still arguing about where to hide. The farmhouse could hold longer if the group settled on one plan. Ben and Harry spend too much time fighting over control. Harry wants everyone in the cellar. Ben wants to defend the main floor and keep an exit. The cellar is easier to seal, but it has one door and already contains a dying child. The main floor has tools and visibility, though every window can fail. Karen changes the plan immediately. She's getting weaker after the bite, so the others need to isolate her with someone watching from behind a barrier. Nobody hides how serious it is. The group also needs a defended room with a second route out. The truck plan fails because the gas pump ignites. Tom and Judy die in the explosion, and the ghouls consume their remains. That failed escape also removes people who are helping defend the house. A vehicle is useful only if the group can reach it, fuel it, and leave without turning the yard into a fire trap. The broadcasts offer hope. Armed groups are clearing the countryside, and morning eventually brings a posse near the farmhouse. Ben survives the night by retreating to the cellar after the upper floor is overrun. He kills the reanimated Coopers and waits until daylight. Then the rescuers shoot him through a window. They see movement in a house surrounded by the dead and fire before identifying him. Ben needs to stay below the window line and call out from cover. A white cloth or another clear human signal should appear before his head does. None of that guarantees the posse waits. The 20% estimate comes from workable rules and terrible coordination. Fire repels the dead, and damage to the head stops them. Barriers buy time. The group receives public information while the event is still happening, then loses those advantages through secrecy and constant conflict. The rescue force treats every distant figure as a target. This film doesn't punish one foolish person. It shows several people making defensible choices that can't coexist. An average survivor needs the group to agree before the first barrier breaks. That dependency pushes the odds well below Ringu, where one person can still act alone. Number 6 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, at 16%. For Sally, the clock begins at dusk after Kirk, Pam, and Jerry fail to return from the neighboring property. You're beside Franklin. The van is low on fuel, Jerry took its keys, and the group is already split. The people who might explain what happened are part of the danger. Leatherface and his family are human. That gives them limits. They can be injured. They can also be surprised and killed. The hitchhiker dies under a truck. Leatherface cuts his own leg with the chainsaw during the road chase. Sally escapes in the back of a pickup while he's left swinging the saw behind her. Those limits don't help the first people who enter the house. Kirk steps through an open doorway and is hit with a hammer before he can understand what's in front of him. Pam finds the room filled with bones and tries to leave, but Leatherface catches her at the porch. Jerry opens the freezer without knowing Pam is still alive inside it. Each person reaches the property alone, and Leatherface only has to control one doorway at a time. By the chosen start point, Sally knows 3 friends are missing. She doesn't know they entered the same house, or that the gas station cook belongs to the family. She has enough information to stop searching in the dark. Stay with Franklin. Move toward the highway together. Make noise where passing drivers can hear it. Don't enter another isolated building to ask for help. Franklin's wheelchair makes movement through the woods slower, but abandoning him creates 2 separate targets. Leatherface kills him when he finds both siblings in the dark. A better route follows the road instead of cutting through brush that hides anyone approaching. The gas station looks safe and becomes another trap. The cook speaks calmly and offers help before beating Sally and taking her back to the house. An average traveler has no reason to know the station belongs to the same family. Once Sally is tied inside the house, planning barely matters. She only lives because the family keeps delaying the killing, and Grandpa can't hold the hammer. Their argument gives Sally another opening. She gets loose, jumps through a window, and reaches the road before Leatherface can recover. Her escape is real, so the percentage stays above the last 5 entries. It's also built from injuries and delays no captive could arrange. The useful window exists before the family has physical control. Keep the group together and preserve the vehicle. Several missing friends are a reason to find public help, not to send another person toward the same house. I never find the chainsaw as disturbing as the metal door after Kirk's death. The door closes in one clean movement, and the house returns to work. It tells you that this has happened often enough to have a routine. Number 5 is A Nightmare on Elm Street, at 12%. Nancy's position becomes yours after Tina dies and Freddy has already reached her dreams. By then, the danger has found her through sleep. She knows Tina described the same burned man and bladed glove before she was killed. She also knows the injuries in the dreams can appear on a waking body. Sleep gives Freddy access that no locked house can remove. Staying awake buys time and steadily damages the victim's ability to think. Caffeine or medication may delay sleep, and constant supervision can help. Nothing eliminates it. One brief lapse is enough for Freddy to control the setting. Inside the dream, ordinary space stops helping. A hallway stretches. Stairs turn soft under Nancy's feet. A bathtub opens into deep water. Freddy can appear, disappear, and change shape. He can also make a victim believe they've woken up. The person outside the dream may not know anything is wrong until injuries begin. Nancy learns from the attacks. She notices that Tina, Rod, and Glenn share the same figure. She brings Freddy's hat into the waking world, proving that an object can cross the boundary. Later, she plans to grab Freddy and wake up while holding him, pulling him into a house prepared with traps. That plan needs a reliable watcher. Glenn promises to help and falls asleep before he can. Nancy's father promises to check on her and then fails to respond quickly enough. The adults around her have understandable reasons to doubt the story, but their doubt becomes part of Freddy's advantage. Medical supervision can help if the staff accepts the risk. Several watchers need staggered shifts, and the sleeper should stay on camera. Alarms should require responses from separate rooms. Keep weapons and sharp edges away from the bed because dream injuries may become physical before anyone can intervene. Nancy's mother eventually reveals that the parents killed Fred Krueger after a legal error allowed him to avoid conviction. That information explains why he's targeting their children. It doesn't provide a dependable way to stop him. Pulling him into waking life makes him vulnerable to physical traps, yet the final scenes refuse to confirm that the victory holds. Nancy turns away and tries to remove the fear that gives Freddy power. Morning appears to return. Then the car locks her inside with her friends, the striped roof closes over them, and Freddy pulls her mother through the front door window. The ending may be another dream, a renewed attack, or proof that Nancy never escaped his control. The film doesn't settle it. I count Nancy as alive at the final frame because the movie doesn't show her death or loss of identity. The uncertainty still lowers the score. Freddy has an entrance every person eventually opens, and his victims have to discover the rules while exhaustion makes every test less reliable. Number 4 is Alien, at 9%. On the Nostromo, you're one of the human crew members still alive immediately after the chestburster escapes into the ship. Kane is dead, and the organism is loose. Nobody knows how quickly it'll grow. They also don't know where it'll hide, or which weapons can be used without putting acid through the deck. The crew has industrial tools, internal doors, and enough equipment to build trackers and flame units. The Narcissus shuttle is available, though it can't support everyone still alive at this point. The Nostromo's maintenance spaces give the creature routes the humans can't watch. The motion tracker tells them something is close without showing whether it's above or below them. A wall may be between them, or nothing may be. The first disaster happened before this start point. Ripley tried to enforce quarantine when Kane returned with the facehugger attached, but Ash opened the airlock against her order. The crew brought an unknown organism inside. The science officer responsible for studying it was already serving a company order that valued the specimen over everyone aboard. After the chestburster, that sabotage remains active. Ash withholds information, redirects decisions, and later attacks Ripley. Special Order 937 confirms that returning the organism is the priority, and the crew is expendable. A survival plan has to account for Ash as well as the animal in the corridors. The shuttle can't evacuate the full crew, but it should still be prepared before the ship enters a crisis countdown. Load the coolant needed for its life support, and keep it ready for whoever can use it. Everyone else stays together in open areas while internal doors seal unused sections. Nobody enters a vent alone. Brett dies while searching for Jones. Dallas enters the ducts with a flamethrower and a tracker, but the creature approaches from a direction the equipment doesn't make clear. The crew chooses flamethrowers because ordinary gunfire could spill blood corrosive enough to cut through several decks. The film never proves that fire is a reliable kill. Blowing the alien into space can work, though vacuum doesn't stop it immediately. Ripley secures herself, opens the shuttle, and uses the engine exhaust to send it away. The self-destruct sequence creates another problem. Once Ripley activates it, she can't stop the explosion after the cancellation window closes. She reaches the shuttle, finds the creature blocking the route, and has to retreat while the clock continues. Parker and Lambert are killed while collecting coolant that should have been moved earlier. Ripley survives because she understands the ship and distrusts the company order. She keeps functioning after the rest of the crew is gone. She also goes back for Jones. I'm never going to object to saving the cat, but I'd put him in the shuttle much earlier. Of the 5 human crew members alive after Kane dies, only Ripley reaches the end. That result doesn't set the percentage by itself, though it fits the conditions. Better choices are still possible after Kane dies. Nobody can change the ship's layout or the acid blood. Ash is already working against them, and the creature grows from something small enough to lose into something strong enough to tear through the crew. Number 3 is The Thing, at 4%. At the Antarctic station, you're still human when the kennel attack reveals that the dog is an imitation. The group now knows an organism can copy another living thing and hide inside a familiar shape. They don't know who else has been exposed, or how quickly assimilation happens. They also have no test that proves someone will remain human. The first useful response is fire. Childs burns the creature after its body splits apart in the kennel. Blair studies the remains and sees individual cells imitating dog tissue. A blackened body still needs to be treated as dangerous. Trust collapses before the group has a procedure. The stored blood is destroyed, and people move around the station without witnesses. Bennings is exposed and almost finishes transforming before the others catch him outside. Blair calculates what could happen if the organism reaches civilization, then destroys the vehicles and radio equipment. His fear is reasonable, but his actions trap every uninfected person with the threat. Macready's blood test creates the clearest rule in the film. He heats a wire and touches it to each sample. The infected blood reacts as a separate organism trying to protect itself. The test works on Palmer. It also happens in a room where several people are tied close to him when he transforms. A better version of that test requires distance. One person collects samples while several others watch. The samples stay in sealed containers. Each person is isolated until their result is complete. A flamethrower is ready before the wire touches the blood, with nobody standing between the operator and the exit. Passing once doesn't create permanent safety. A human can be assimilated later. Every movement needs a witness, especially around sleeping quarters, medical areas, food storage, weapons, and transportation. The film doesn't establish food as a transmission route, so separate meals shouldn't be presented as a proven defense. The danger comes from contact in an organism that can replace a person without leaving an obvious change. The thing can use tools. The Blair imitation builds a small craft below the station from stolen equipment. Waiting for rescue may give it the route it wants. Destroying the station may protect the world and leave every human outside without shelter. The ending gives us McReady and Childs beside the fire. Neither can prove the other is human. Even if both are, the station is burning and the weather can kill them before rescue arrives. The original film doesn't confirm that either man is both alive and human after the final scene. 4% allows for a disciplined group that uses fire and isolation, then runs the blood test early. The station in the film has already lost its stored blood and most of its trust before that system exists. One false result could restart the problem. So could an unwitnessed hallway, or a compromised person controlling the test. Number 2 is the Blair Witch Project, at 2%. You're one of the 3 filmmakers after a full day of walking returns the group to the same log. At that moment, ordinary navigation has failed in a way everyone can see. They still have a compass and some equipment, but the map is gone. Following a direction hasn't changed their location. Earlier preparation could have prevented a normal wilderness emergency. They should have left their route with someone and carried a second map, marking the path, protecting the vehicle location, and setting a firm turnaround time would also help with an ordinary wilderness emergency. Those lessons belong before the chosen start. They don't solve what the film shows after the group is looped back to the same place. The woods give them no stable rule. They hear noises around the tent and can't identify the source. Stone piles appear outside. Stick figures hang from trees. Their belongings are disturbed. Time and distance stop producing results they can trust. Direction stops helping too. Mike admits that he threw the map into the creek. That's a serious act, and the others have every reason to blame him. The confession also gives them a human mistake to focus on. A replacement map might have helped before the loop. Once a full day of travel returns them to the same log, the film no longer supports the idea that one correct bearing is enough. Josh disappears. His voice later seems to call from the darkness. They can't know whether it's Josh or something using his voice. Heather finds a bundle tied with part of his shirt. Inside is bloody material mixed with hair and objects that appear to include teeth. The film never gives a complete account of what happened to him. Staying together is still better than separating. Keep the cameras only if the light or batteries provide practical help. Conserve food and water. Avoid chasing a voice into darkness. Build a visible signal in one open area and wait for daylight before moving. Those choices reduce ordinary risk. They don't create a tested route out. The final house uses a local story without explaining it. Mike runs to the basement. Heather follows and finds him standing in the corner, echoing the account of Rustin Parr forcing one child to face away while another was killed. Her camera falls. We never see an attacker or learn exactly what controls the house. That lack of information earns the 2%. The threat may be supernatural, human, environmental, or several things working together. Every plan depends on choosing an explanation, and the film never confirms one soon enough to use. A skilled hiker can correct a bad route. This group reaches a point where the route itself no longer behaves like evidence. Number 1 is Hereditary, at less than 1%. Peter's position is the one that counts after Charlie dies. The central danger has already been near the family for years, but Charlie's death makes Peter the clear remaining male host in the cult's plan. He doesn't know there's a cult. He knows he caused the accident that killed his sister, and that his family was unstable before it happened. That distinction is what ruins almost every possible defense. Peter understands his grief and guilt as personal problems. The fear arrives without a useful explanation. The audience can connect the symbols to Ellen's history. Peter can't tell which strangers belong to it. Every clue reaches him through a family member he has reasons to distrust. Annie's relationship with Ellen was already complicated. Ellen had unusual access to Charlie. Annie also says her brother died by suicide after accusing Ellen of trying to put people inside him. After the funeral, Ellen's grave is desecrated. Steve learns about it and hides the call from Annie because he thinks the news will make her condition worse. That understandable decision removes another piece of the pattern from the family conversation. Joan approaches Annie through grief and teaches her a seance. Annie brings the ritual home because she believes she can contact Charlie. The family sees objects move and hears Annie speak in Charlie's voice. Steve reads it as another crisis. Peter sees his mother's behavior through the memory of her sleepwalking and telling him she never wanted to be pregnant. The cult doesn't need everyone to accept the same explanation. It benefits whenever one family member starts protecting themselves from the others. Annie eventually finds the photographs linking Joan to Ellen and a book describing Paimon. She learns that the cult prefers a male host. By then, the evidence arrives through someone whose family no longer trusts her judgment. Burning Charlie's sketchbook kills Steve instead of ending the threat. The house becomes openly impossible only after the ordinary support system has collapsed. Peter has no reliable action at the chosen start. Leaving the house with Steve could help if they moved before the seance and refused contact with Joan. Peter has no reason to propose that. Reporting a cult would require evidence he hasn't seen. Avoiding Annie may protect him from one immediate danger and move him toward the people already waiting outside. The final attack removes the last uncertainty. Annie is possessed and chases Peter. He finds the attic filled with evidence and cult members around the property. He watches Annie kill herself with the wire. He jumps through the window. A light enters his body, and he rises with the sound associated with Charlie. In the treehouse, Joan addresses him as Paimon. She describes the male body as the corrected host. Peter's body reaches the end of the film. Peter does not. That's why the estimate remains below 1%. This ranking counts survival as remaining yourself, so the final body can't be treated as a technical success. Any useful defense would have required investigating Ellen's associates years earlier. The family would have needed to limit her access to the children, and recognized that she was preparing a ritual. Peter learns about the plan only after the cult has shaped the family from inside. Jaws stays at the top because its rule is almost insulting: stay on land. Peter never receives anything that useful in Hereditary. Most of the ranking turns on the warning. When it arrives late, or the wrong person controls the available help, one bad choice can do too much damage before anyone understands it. Bad information does more damage than fear. One true rule, delivered early enough, can make even a monster manageable. Without it, a normal room may already be a trap. I'd still rather face the shark than spend one night in the Graham house. At least the shark has the decency to stay in the water,